Thank you so much. Hey, Don. Okay, so let's get real for a second. We're friends, right? We're not. We're
so
not
far.
You'll be a better friend when you buy a house from me. So,
we should talk. I'm in the market. But so let's talk about Comicsgate a little bit. Just talk about the realness. Let's get real with it for a second here.
All right.
So you told me in our last interview, I didn't even realize you were a Comicsgate guy, right? Because there's no Comicsgate logos. You don't talk about that stuff explicitly a lot, but you said, yes, I am. And so I'm not going to judge you and say, because obviously, well, I don't think you're a racist guy. I don't even think that you're a sexist dude from any of the stuff that I've read that you've written, right? Like your stuff, like I don't see much politics and I just see funny. Don wants funny jokes. But yet you've sort of thrown in with this group that does have certain views that like I gotta like push back against. Comics are for everybody. Girls like comics. There are lots of great, it's those kind of things that push me away from the name, the brand Comicsgate. But I don't see that in your work per se. So why don't you explain to me why you've thrown in? Because from the outside, the cynical me says, because it's a great way to move comic books, to push books.
Yeah, that's a complicated question because I think there are degrees of people that I think the public perception of Comicsgate is one thing, and then when you're actually part of the community, it becomes something different. So I really wasn't familiar with what the whole debate was until I started watching Ethan. And at the time, Ethan and I were working on a project together, which was a Cyberfrog Hamsters crossover that Dynamite Comics was going to publish. And so I was really excited because, as you guys know, Cyberfrog is probably one of the biggest titles out there. And so
we reviewed it.
Yeah, we were working on what was supposed to be like a one-shot crossover between them because they both came out like in the late 80s, early 90s, and they're funny animals with cool powers. And we wanted to do a revival because the Hamsters hadn't been really around since like 2007 or 8 was the last miniseries that Dynamite.
And you no longer control the rights to the Hamsters, just to be clear, right, Don?
That's
you
correct.
Sold those to Dynamite Comics.
That is correct. So, so what happened was the publisher Nick Barucci of Dynamite, he was hanging out on the streams with Ethan and just kind of having a good camaraderie with some of the different people there. And then I think some of the people that worked for Dynamite got wind of Nick's affiliation with just kind of palling around. And Nick and Ethan have known each other for a long time. They live not very far away from one another. So anyways, Nick got a lot of flack from other people for basically hanging out with what people thought were a biased group of creators or prejudiced. And unfortunately, the Hamsters Cyberfrog project kind of took a hit because Nick had to kind of make a choice whether he was going to appease one group of people that he works with or another. And so our project got shelved and it's kind of in limbo. We had an art team that was working on it and unfortunately it fell apart. So that to me, when I think of Comicsgate, I kind of think of people that are more conservative, right-leaning politically. I think Ethan has taken a lot of flack for, vocally supporting President Trump. And, that's kind of where I lean to. It doesn't mean that everybody that's in Comicsgate is a, supporter of Trump. But I see that most of the people that I hang out with kind of have the same belief system as I do. And they don't like feeling like they're being ostracized by liberals. And that's kind of what I've seen, even though you read my work and you can see that I'm not, bashing anybody over the head and I'm not being politically incorrect. I'm just having a good time like I was back in the 90s. And I want to bring humor back because we don't have a Mad Magazine or cracked anymore. So when I do a comic book, I'm not out to burn any bridges. I just want to have fun. So I kind of stay in the lane where if I do a stream, I'm not really talking about the hot button topics that other people might be talking about. But I can say that the people that I affiliate with, they are vocally Comicsgate, and what they think that means may be different than what I'm telling you right now. So yeah, just like Eric says, Eric is a very, very big supporter of what we do at Parody Press. And, I didn't know that's where he stood, but I think it got a bum rap. I think there's a lot of people that are doing great comics, and a lot of the other comic book community is just, I'm sorry, I got a guy mowing my lawn outside.
Okay.
They just kind of pigeonhole Comicsgate as this group of racist, sexist people. And I found that to be totally not the case with the people that I hang out with. And you just see these tweets from people just saying Comics Group is a hate group. And I've never had that experience.
Don, maybe not explicit racism, although I've seen it, in that crowd. We've seen it on this show. But I will say explicit sexism, explicit anti-homophobic sentiments and comments. So, I see those things, and I don't think that means that's the end of the world per se, but it's not something I would want to be associated with. Definitely. If the only connection I see to Comicsgate and your stuff is those couple of variant covers, maybe in this book. There's no explicit Comicsgate stuff that I can recall. And I just think, you have to make a choice, and you've made a financial choice. I feel like that you can sell more books by selling to that audience. And I'm not making a moral judgment on you for that. Maybe I am a little bit in my heart, but you got to go where you got to go to sell books. I really understand that. And I don't see you preaching, like I said, the worst of it, but there is the whole oh, you fellas, when you call each other homos and when you make little jokes about being too feminine and how girls won't read comics, does that get under your skin at all, or do you feel that way too?
I don't know. When I grew up, if you read the Hamsters, it was very irreverent and very kind of undergroundy, and I had a lot of jokes that probably wouldn't fly if I released the Hamsters today. There was a lot of borderline humor that when we were growing up was fine. A lot of the movies that we watched, Airplane,
True,
Woody Allen, the old Saturday Night Live stuff, that stuff would probably not really go over well anymore. So
are you kidding? Woody Allen just released a new movie, Don, and it made $24,000 in its opening weekend last weekend.
With that, Woody Allen made a $24,000 grossing movie. Wow.
Yeah,
that's sad.
Because of this, I don't want to use the term Overton window, but I just did. So that has shifted over time of what is considered acceptable speech and what is not. And I'm sure somebody of your heritage can appreciate that too, because there was a time when it was definitely more acceptable to make anti-Chinese type slurs. And even in the area that you and I both lived on, there was a rich history of anti-Chinese discrimination, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Oh, yeah.
And how that's shifted over time. So this is just where I go, it just feels like the Comicsgate guys are kind of older dudes, kind of just stuck in that 80s and not willing to accept kind of that some of these things ideas may have passed them by.
Here's where I think because I'm kind of new to the whole Comicsgate community. I've only been really involved probably for the last year and a half. I might have come in and not known a lot about what the big hubbub was with, earlier conversations, because the people that I communicate with and that I'm interacting with lately, I don't sense the sexist. I'd like to see specific examples of either tweets or programming where the creators that you're which that are upsetting you have said. And maybe, I don't know if they were taking.
I mean, dude, you don't have to look far to find an an extremely sexist or homophobic statement from Ethan Van Sciver in specific, and he is the figurehead right now of that movement to the point that you're putting him on the cover of your comics. And again, Don, I like you. I really do. I just feel, and I'm glad that we can have an honest discussion like this, like, because I really want to know.
That's good. That's good. I think the dialogue is good, and rather than just kind of have this one-sided opinion and not having a conversation, that's the key to, I think, having some kind of mutual middle ground between the two factions that they are. But honestly, I'm just here to make comics, and even though, I'm affiliated with Comicsgate, I've seen that. You think maybe it's the way to, make more money, but actually I've seen a lot of people say, I'm not going to support you because you are this way, and I'm not going to hire you to write my books because you're this way. So I've seen prejudice from the other side too, and I don't think that really gets thrown out there. And my wife and I are both, we're pretty mild people. We don't really we're pretty mellow, and we like to get along and love people. And that's why I love being on your shows, because I know I might have this uncomfortable conversation, but at the same time, it's healthy. And as long as we respect one another, what's the harm in that? I think when you respect you,
and I'm not afraid to say these things here, just like you're not afraid to sometimes, ding me a little on Twitter or whatever, like to call my attention to some of my stuff, and that's okay. I want to bring in another guy here.
Oh, can I was just going to say, can I say something to Don real fast? Like, I admire that you are even addressing this, because I'm like an unindicted co-conspirator. All this stuff happened way after I started really paying attention to comics. So I'm like you, like, I don't even know what the big deal is. And me personally, I don't care about anybody's politics and comics or whatsoever. Good, like, I just want are you doing a good comic? Then that's great. And once you start parsing somebody like you that's doing parody and humor and stuff like that, then there's a whole like, well, that's not funny, then comes into it. And I really admire you even trying to deal with this at all. I would get so frustrated. It's like, hey man, can we just talk about my comic? Like,
this is liberal Larry from San Francisco.
So yeah, it was a simpler time before the internet made it possible for us to automatically say what we were thinking. Because back in the 80s and 90s, there was no internet. I mean, we were basically dial-up modems and CompuServe, and now it's just like,
comic book letter columns.
Yeah. Exactly. You would have to submit your stuff and wait snail mail to get a response. It wasn't like you could upload your stuff and get a response right away.
So one more thing before we bring in our other guy is like, why? So what? The next question I have is, what do you get out of saying I'm associated with anybody? It's like any group is going to have supporters and detractors. And my idea of comics was always more like Warren Ellis's, like, we come in alone, right? Everybody has an idea of what that comic is because you don't read it in a stadium. You read it by yourself. So I don't see the value, besides commercial value, of saying that you're associated with any group, because you're going to piss off half the audience by doing that.
Yeah.
So I was so that's why I admire you, because you're like, it's almost like a stand you're making, right?
There's some
I just wanted to put up with the real.
All right.
This is it. This is the real. I mean, there's no other reason than to sell more books. Comicsgate has a targeted audience that if you can market to them, and throughout their community, Don brings in people and promotes their comics, and he sells his comics to that crew. So I get it. And when I put these dollars up, guys, I love dollars, right? Like, that's the thing. I love them. I love them. So but I also like to be really clear about like where my own motivations are coming from, because I really considered, like, if I just was willing to like jump on that bandwagon, I'm pretty sure I'd have more subscribers. I definitely have more super chats and more views. And I just couldn't buy in, just because I'm fundamentally opposed to some of the biggest things that the biggest people there love to talk about. In all honesty, I see Comicsgate as a troll movement more than an artistic movement, because there's not an artistic like cohesion amongst the books that are coming out from them per se, other than their avowed lack of politics, which I don't know if a lack of that, I don't even know. It's a tricky question, but I will say this, Don, I'm not canceling you. I'm not othering you. I like you. I respect you. I want to meet you in person. I want to hang out with you. I want to talk comic books with you because I know you love comics. I just feel like the only way we're going to get back into reality, we can't just say everybody forget it. Like, let's be friends. We have to find these common ground. And that's honestly why I started. One of the reasons I started the show, and one of the reasons I've reached out to the wide variety of people that I've reached out to.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of which, I want to bring in another guy who's been waiting patiently, and we can talk about his comics, and we can talk about all this stuff too. And we still haven't even got to Mal's yet. So let's bring in, I only know him by Schlepzig, but his real name is Sam Blanchard. Welcome to the show, Sam.